What is up, guys? My name is Lex and welcome back to the vlog. Playing 5-10 no limit at the Hard Rock, buying in for $2,500. Last week was pretty rough for us. We lost almost every session we played, losing around $3,500 on the week. So today we're going to hopefully run good and get some of that money back. Getting right into the action here, I have a pretty speculative hand on the button, King 7 of diamonds, but there's a recreational player who's playing just about every hand, and he limps for $10. I ISO raise to 50, and he makes the call. I want to be playing pots heads up in position against this guy. Flop is ace high, he checks to me, and given the fact that I do have king high, I'm probably good here a lot of the time. I put out a small C bet of $35. I would do this same thing with my ace X hand, some of my flush draws, and possibly under pairs to the ace. I make it 35 and he pretty quickly calls. Going to the turn, which is a 4. When he checks it over to me, I think I can continue to barrel here. Try to put pressure on all of his smaller pocket pairs, all of his 9x holdings. I continue for 105 and my opponent pretty quickly makes the call, which is telling me that he either has a pair or a draw. There's no way that he's going to be check calling 2-pair or a set on this turn, given the fact that there's a straight draws and flush draws. So going to the last card, which is the 6 of spades, now he instantly checks it over to me, and I have to think to myself, should I continue to bluff here or just give up on this river? And I'm pretty sure if my opponent called 2 streets with a flush draw and hit his flush on the river, he would contemplate betting out for value. So given the fact that he just snap checked it over to me, I'm going to put in the triple barrel bluff. I make it $450 here with just king high total air. Even though I've been playing poker for a while now, I still get the adrenaline pumping when I'm making a bluff. My heart is beating through my chest, hoping for a fold here. He thinks for about 20 seconds and decides to let his cards go. So we end up getting this bluff through, which is definitely nice. He later told me he had a weak ace, so it looks like that $450 bet size was good. Moving on to the next hand. There's a $35 raise and a call before I look down at ace king and the small blind. Pretty good spot to put in a squeeze play here. I make it $200 before my camera decides to flip over on itself and show my face. That's what I look like before I'm about to play a 3-bet pot. Flop comes out 7-7 deuce rainbow, and I think this is a pretty good board to c-bet on. My opponent's going to have a lot of pocket pairs that I can put pressure on the turn and the river. He's going to have some weaker ace highs and also some Broadway cards that totally miss this board. I bet $200 and he pretty quickly makes the call. The turn card is a 4, which doesn't help us at all, and now it's decision time. I have to decide now, should I continue to bluff or should I just check and give up? And if I check here, my opponent is probably going to bet almost 100% of the time. He's the kind of player that's going to be floating me a lot on the flop, looking to take it away on the turn or the river. So if I check here and he puts out a $300 or $400 bet, I'm just going to have to check fold ace high, which I don't want to do. So I continue to bet here. I bet $375, just trying to take down this pot. However, that doesn't work. My opponent literally beats me into the pot. He makes a snap call for $375, going to the river, looking for an ace or a king, which we do not get. It's an offsuit 3, so it does bring in 5-6 for a straight draw on the turn. I think for probably about 20 seconds here, and now decide to give up. I check, just looking to try to get to showdown here. I think my opponent may check back a hand like pocket 8s or pocket 9s some of the time, given the fact that I could potentially have a bigger pair than him. However, he does not check back. He thinks for about 30 seconds and puts out a pretty large bet. He bets $450, and given the fact that this board is paired, there's some straights and possibly full houses, and obviously any pair beats us, I can't call this and I just make the fold. This table is action. The pots are getting big and things are heating up, especially for us when we look down at a premium pocket kings in middle position. There's a limp. We make it $50 before an action player in the cutoff makes it $200. So this is just great for us. Now we get to put in a 4-bet with a premium hand, pocket kings. We just have to decide what sizing should I use. I think for a little bit of time, and given the fact that I just added on after my ace-king bluff hand and won a couple small pots, I have around $2,700 in my stack. So I decide to go $650, a little over 3x out of position. The dealer collects my chips and announces raise before counting out $650 worth of chips. Now the table quiets down and things start to get pretty serious. The cutoff goes in the tank just for about 5 seconds before making the call for $650, so we're going heads up with pocket kings to the flop. The board is 7-7 deuce again, which is just super weird because that's literally the same exact board that I had just a couple hands ago with ace king. This is a great board for me. I think my opponent's going to have a lot of hands like 10s, jacks, queens, or ace king, and I don't think he's going to be folding on this board. So I decide to put out a bet. I make it $450. Looking back now, I think I could go a little bit bigger on this flop bet. I think I could go maybe $550 or up to $700, given the fact that this opponent hates to fold. He makes the call for $450, going to the turn, which is an offsuit 5, and now I get a little tricky, and I'll tell you guys my thought process. If he has a hand like ace king or ace queen, and I bet, he's just going to fold. If he has a pocket pair and I check, he's going to bet, and I could potentially, most likely, check raise all in and try to get all the money in before any scare cards come out on the river. So I check, and unfortunately, he checks back. So I'm pretty sure he has a hand like ace high or a suited king high hand. The river is a 3, and there's still some hope that my opponent can have a pair like 10s or jacks that he possibly pot controlled on the turn and decided not to bet, given the fact that I'm showing so much aggression by 4-betting preflop and betting the flop. So if he has an ace high or a king high hand, it doesn't matter what I bet, he's just going to fold. So I decide to go big here and polarize, trying to get him to hero call with all of his pocket pairs. I make it $1,350 here with pocket kings. I do have a lot of history with this opponent. I have tried to bluff him and a couple other players at the table in the past, and he has seen it, so I'm hoping that will help him call down light. He thinks for over a minute and decides to fold, showing ace king, and was pretty mad about it. I fold my hand, and we end up taking down this pretty big pot here with pocket kings. We added on to our stack early, but now we are sitting on $4,200 with a nice yellow bird $1,000 chip at the top. Moving on to the next hand. There is a raise to $40 in the hijack, and I have jack 10 of diamonds in the cutoff, and I decide to just make the call. So going heads up here to the flop, which we flop trips on 10, 6, 10 with 1 diamond. Pretty good board for us. My opponent decides to put out a small C bet. He makes it $25, and I contemplate raising, but given the fact that I have this board so crushed, I just make the call here. The turn is the queen of diamonds, giving us a flush draw now along with our trips, and now my opponent checks, which is not what we were really hoping to see. We decide to put out a bet here. I make it $100, trying to get value from all of his weaker pairs, maybe his weak queen X hands, ace king, or ace jack. He makes the call for $100, going to the river, which is an offsuit king. It does improve hands like ace jack or jack 9 that now beat us. They make a straight, but we do block a lot of those hands having a jack in our hand. So when he checks it over to me, I decide to go for value here, trying to get called by king queen, king jack, or ace king. I make it $260, and before my chips hit the felt, he says, good hand, you got it, and he ends up folding. This next hand is against the same opponent that we played the 4-bet pot with pocket kings just earlier. He switches over to the 9 seat and limps under the gun. I have ace queen of diamonds in middle position and make it 50, and he makes the call. We see a board of queen 6-8 with 2 diamonds. I flop top pair, top kicker, and the nut flush draw. I see bet $40, and my opponent pretty quickly makes the call. The turn is a 5, he checks, and I should be betting here almost 100% of the time. However, this time I decide to check. This turn card is going to help him a lot with some straights, 2 pairs, and sets, going to the river, which is another queen, giving us trips, and whenever he checks it over to me, I'm feeling pretty amazing about my hand. I decide to put out a pretty big bet here. I make it $200. My opponent thinks for about 10 seconds and decides to put in the call. I show ace queen for trips, and he mucks. This opponent does not like to lose to me, so he's pretty visibly frustrated. Moving on to the next hand against the same opponent, I have ace 10 offsuit now, raise it up to $35 in middle position, and he makes the call in the big blind. The flop is ace 5-9 Skittles. Shout out to the Lodge Live for giving me that reference. It's a rainbow board, so I down bet here to $30. My opponent decides to put in a check raise. He makes it $150. And on this board, I don't think he's ever check raising this big with value. I just think he's bluffing me or trying to bluff me almost 100% of the time. So I just make the call, trying to let him hang himself here and continue to bet. Going to the turn, which is another ace, giving us trips. He continues to bet here. He puts out a bet of $250. Now, of course, he can have some hands that we're losing to. He can have ace 5, ace 9, pocket 5s, or pocket 9s. But if he has one of those hands, we're just going to get coolered here. So I don't think a raise is necessary. That'll just have him fold out all of his bluffs and all of his air balls, and he'll probably only call me whenever he's beating me. So I just make the call for $250, going to the river. Last card, deuce of spades, and I'm really hoping my opponent continues to bluff here. I already have my mind made up. Basically, whatever he bets, I'm going to call. I'm not going to raise because I think that would be slightly overplaying my hand, and I'm obviously just never folding to this guy. So he thinks for about 30 seconds, and unfortunately, he checks, which means that he doesn't have anything at all. However, I can't check back an ace here, trip aces with a 10 kicker, so I put out a pretty hefty bet. I make it $450, just trying to get called by anything. However, just like I thought, he was bluffing and he pretty quickly folds. We are on a roll so far. We were stuck early, but now we're up about $1,500 before we look down at ace king in the cutoff. I decided to raise it up to $35, and the small blind and the big blind make the call. King, jack, 4 with 2 clubs. We flop top pair, top kicker. Very good board for us. When my opponents check to me, I put out a C bet of $65. Now the action's on the small blind, a player that I played about 15 or 20 sessions with. She plays fairly face up, doesn't really get too out of line, but she likes to call. She decides to put in a raise. She check raises me up to $150. We have top pair, top kicker. Our hand is super strong. However, this opponent would just call with all of her flush draws and straight draws. So whenever she check raises here, it's a little bit worrisome. She's repping 2 pairs like king 4 or king jack or pocket jacks or pocket 4s. So I think about possibly folding just here on the flop, giving her credit for those hands. But I think that's just a little bit too weak. Given the fact that I'm in position, I decide I'm going to make the call. And if the turn is a break and she fires out huge, I'll just make the fold and put her on a better hand. Going to the turn, which is an offsuit 7. She continues to bet. However, she bets fairly small. And given the fact that she bets smaller and not bigger, I think she most likely just has a king here like king 10, king 9, or king queen. She makes it $170. If she had a set or 2 pair on this board, I think she would probably double her bet size from the flop, make it at around 275 or 300. So given the fact that she went smaller relative to the pot, she makes it 170. I'm pretty positive I have the best hand now, so I make the call. The river is a 6, so the front door flush draw does brick, and now my opponent looks over at me and decides to check. This is obviously great news. She's never going to be checking this river with 2 pair or a set, so we 100% have the best hand now, but we have to decide what bet sizing should we use, and I'm pretty sure she just has a weaker king than me, so I decide to go big. I put out a $525 bet. She immediately asked the dealer how much the bet is, which is good news for us, because if she was bluffing and she had total air, she would just immediately fold. So now she takes some chips off of her stack. She lines up $525 in chips and puts them to the side. She looks back at her cards and then back at her chip stack and basically saying to herself, well, if I make this call and I'm wrong, how much chips am I going to have in my stack after that? She has about $1,200 behind, so I'm obviously hoping for a call here. She thinks for over a minute, going back and forth, looking at her cards, looking at me, tossing her chips up and down, and ultimately she settles on a call. So it looks like we're getting paid off here. We show ace king and it is good. So we end up scooping another pot here. We're up about $2,000 on the session. Our stack is looking pretty good now. We're in Profitsville, running good. However, the next 2 hours or so, we just run super cold. In the next 2 hours, we lose about $1,000 of our profit. In this hand, we have queen jack of spades, open it up in a straddle pot, get 3-bet, we defend and miss the flop. Next hand, we have king queen offsuit, button raises. We put in a 3-bet to $300. He puts in a 4-bet to $900, and we have to fold. Another straddle pot, I look down at pocket 8s, I raise it up, and I get 3-bet by the straddler to a $250. I make the call going to an A-side board. He puts out a $200 C-bet. I make the call on the turn. He barrels again for $475, and I have to fold this one. We raise it up to $60 with pocket 3s and a straddle pot, and only the big blind makes the call. The flop is super dry. I put out a small C-bet, and he check calls. The turn goes check, check, and the river, my opponent leads out for $75. I make the call, and he shows us a better pair. We are in the main game now and look down at pocket aces. Unfortunately, my camera shut off during the hand, so I don't have the footage, but we did flop top set, got 1 street of value before our opponent folded, but I do have one more interesting hand from this session. Our buddy from the previous hands with pocket kings and ace 10, he is on massive tilt now. His stack is going up and down. He was up about $2,000, and now he's left with around $1,500 stack. He makes it 50, and I make the call in the big blind with queen 7 of clubs. Board is 6-3-6 with 2 clubs. We flop a flush draw. We end up check calling $75, going to the turn, which gives us a flush. It's the 4 of clubs, and now I decide to lead out here. I don't want my opponent to check an overpair or possibly an ace or king high hand with a club, so I lead out for $225. He decides to look back at his cards, probably looking for a club, and ultimately decides to call $225. So things are looking good for us. Going to the river, which is pretty awful. It's another 6, so now any pair makes a full house. Basically the worst river in the deck. Obviously an awful card for us. I don't think I could be betting for value here and get called by a weaker hand, so I decide to check, and I'm hoping that it either goes check, check, and we win against ace or king high, or he might put out a bet and maybe I'll check call depending on the bet sizing. So I check it over to my opponent, who is obviously tilting, pretty annoyed that he's losing so much money on the session. He decides to put out a $650 bet here. Obviously, not the river we were looking to see, but this bet sizing kind of makes it easier on me. It's a very polarized bet sizing. It's a huge bet, basically saying I have a super strong hand or I have nothing at all. Let's say my opponent bet around $200 or $250 on this river. He could be doing that with a wide range of hands. A lot of full houses like a 4, a 3, pocket 5s, or pocket 7s. But whenever he bets so big, $650, he's saying, I have a big pocket pair like jacks, queens, kings, and aces, and I'm not scared of any pair you might have. I also think that my opponent may check back a full house if he had a 3 or a 4, just trying to get to showdown, worried that I might have a bigger full house than him. I have been thinking now for over a minute, and at first I thought I was going to fold, but now thinking about it more, I might call. He can still have a lot of bluffs here. He could have a lot of bluffs like ace X with the ace of clubs, king of clubs, or jack of clubs. He could be using this 6 as a scare card, trying to get me off a flush or maybe a smaller full house. This bet sizing is super polarized, and given the fact that he's on tilt, he's down money, and he's lost a lot of pots to me today, and he doesn't want to lose any more. He could be betting here as a big bluff, trying to get me off my hand. I don't think I can fold against this guy. I put in the call after 2 minutes of tanking, and he shows 8-9 with the 9 of clubs for 9 high. We show queen 7 of clubs for the flush, and we are going to take this pot down. We end up racking up our chips, coloring up, and heading out for the night. That is it. Vlog number 39 is in the books, out here by the beautiful Guitar Hotel at night, all lit up, out here by the pool as well. We had to sneak in to get back here. I do have a media pass so I can show the security that, but I had to kind of hop a fence in order to get back here, but I did it for you guys, did it for the subscribers, so hope you guys like this outro view. So anyway, pretty interesting session there. Was stuck probably like 600 or 700, then had that pocket kings hand against the action player, won that pot, and then just kind of went up and down and up and down. Got a couple bluffs through, 3-bet a couple hands, didn't get that through. Won a small pot with aces, won that pretty big pot with queen 7 of clubs, calling there on that 3-6 board, which was kind of a sketchy call, but turned out to be right, which was nice. In the game for a little over $4,000. Cashing out for $56.60 for a profit of $1,510, which is what we needed because last week we basically lost like 500 or 1,000 every single day. So needed the win today, that is for sure. All right, I'm going to wrap up this video before I start sweating any more than I already have. I'm out here talking at night and it feels like it's 100 degrees because of the South Florida humidity. It's pretty wild. But I was showing one of my non-poker friends my YouTube channel, and he asked how many subscribers I had, and I said I have around 22,000, and he was in shock. And you know, it doesn't really hit me until I maybe tell someone or look that 22,000 people are subscribed to this channel. And I just want to thank all of you guys again for liking, for commenting, for sharing it, for telling your friends, and subscribing to the channel. It definitely means a lot and helps the channel grow. So next up, I'm going to be coming out with one more video here at the Hard Rock. Then next Wednesday, August 18th, I'm going to MGM National Harbor. I'm going to be visiting my brother in Arlington, Virginia. Then I'm going to be going home to Deep Creek Lake, Maryland, where I grew up, where I lived the first 18 years of my life. One of my best friends from high school is getting married, so I'm going to be back there doing that. But I'm going to be having 1 or 2 vlogs from MGM National Harbor. I've been there before, and it's a great room. I'm hoping it's still good action. Looking to play some 1-3 or 2-5 or maybe 5-10. We'll see how that goes. So hope you guys like this video. If you did, hit that like, subscribe button, comment down below. And until next time, I'll see you.